Well, hey, and welcome to the Impactus Young Man's podcast, where we help young men become, grow, and live as disciples of Jesus and help them navigate what it means to be a Christian man in today's cultural moment. I'm not sure about you, but at times in life, I can be quite discouraged about where things are at. I mean, just recently I was at a party and everyone were discussing their investments, their mortgage, and all these things. And at times it's easy to feel as though you're just falling behind. Or perhaps you're on the opposite end where you know that inside of you is this unhealthy ambition to gather wealth for yourself. But at times we can go from one ditch to the other, over hyper focused on how things are not going your way or how you wish you could be further ahead. And then the other one where you're hyper fixated on maybe holding things and hoarding resources for yourself. I know I've felt that. And today, as a young man, there can be a lot of pressure to really be rich and listen to voices that say you should have this by this age. And if you're not doing this, then you're not doing enough. At times, you just have to tune it out. Well, today on the podcast, we have Bob Lotich. And Bob has an incredible story about how he was able to go from really having $7 in his bank account to being able to give $1 million away to God's work by the time he was 40. That's incredible. And today on the podcast, we discuss his new book. The title is Simple Money, Rich Life. And I'm hoping it's going to be an encouragement to you. We talk about what are some of the ways that we can kind of reframe our understanding of wealth. We talk about simple ways that we can really make as much money as we can, save as much money as we can, and then give as much money as we can. Doesn't that sound encouraging? That and so much more on today's podcast. Let's jump right in. Bob, man, so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Jordan, I'm excited to be here, and I enjoy your haircut. You and I go to the same barber, I can tell, and it's a good one.
Yeah, I like your shirt color choice too, man.
I know, we got it all going on, right?
Well, listen, man, I'm so excited. There's so much I want to talk to you about today, Bob. But one of the first things I would love for you to just touch on is kind of just what was the moment for you where you really got started in this kind of realm of talking about money and finances and budgeting. You tell this story in the book, which we'll talk about in a moment, about you driving your car. Tell our audience what you're talking about there.
Yeah, so this was kind of my turning point financially. So I had grown up, my parents actually at age 7 or 8 thought I was going to be an accountant because I played with my piggy bank so much and counted my money all the time. And then I get through high school and I start working at a bank. And so all my friends just assume I'm really good at money. And I got all this money stuff figured out. And the fact is, I wasn't. My whole financial life was like a house of cards that looked good on the outside, but then a little gust of wind blows and it throws the whole thing down. And so what the story you're referring to was literally the day before my 21st birthday. I was down in a small Florida town, beach town, and I was excited about my friends who were going to come down the next day. And I was living there, kind of like on a 1-year sabbatical type of thing. And so I didn't really know anybody there. But I have my convertible. I'm driving down this beautiful, it's like March 5th, I guess it would have been. I'm driving down this beautiful road, palm trees everywhere. The sun's out. It's like 75 degrees. I had just gotten paid. It was Friday. And it's like everything's going great. My friends are about to come down. And as I'm driving, my car just like breaks down, stops moving in the middle of the road. Engine just dies. And I'm not as much of a car guy, and so I don't really know what's going on. I keep turning the key like 100 times, thinking maybe it'll start, and it didn't. And so I'm sitting there in the middle of the road as all these cars are driving by. Everyone's gawking, and some people are honking and whatever. Get out of my way. Like I wish I could. So I get out, and then I grab the steering wheel, push the door, and like push it all to the shoulder and do all that stuff. And as I'm doing this, the thoughts start unpacking in my brain about what's going to happen the next few hours. And I get in my car and the weight of this all starts going on my shoulders because I realize, wait a minute, I have to now get my paycheck I just took because I was driving to the bank to cash it so that I can go pay my rent that was due that day. And I realized if I don't pay that rent by the end of the day, they're going to tack on a $50 late fee.
Oh, no.
And my paycheck is just enough to cover the rent. I only have $7 in my checking account. I have one credit card. My saving grace was that I only thought you could have one credit card.
Or you would have been in trouble.
Like, that level of naivete like really helped me out a lot. But so I had one credit card and it was nearly maxed out, like $260 from being maxed out. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm like, how am I possibly going to get this car towed, repaired, and then get to the bank and then get to pay my landlord all in the next 3.5 hours? And it was in that moment that I realized I'm not as smart with money as I thought, or as that I led everyone else to be. And I don't know as much about this as I thought and believed.
Right.
And I remember like grabbing that steering wheel as the weight of all this pressure was coming down on me, like, death grip on that wheel, and tears are coming down my eyes, and I'm crying out to God. And I remember like just praying, Lord, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how to get out of here. But if you have a plan, if you have a way out of this mess, if you actually want to be involved in my financial life, like I am finally ready to listen and to obey whatever you have for me. Wow. And so that was a turning point for me. And I think it's like that for a lot of us. Like we have to reach this point of things just getting bad enough that we're like, okay, whatever. What do you have, God? Like I'm all ears. Let's do it.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. I couldn't help but think about that story last night. And I'll tell you why. I hosted a Super Bowl party. I don't know if you watched the game or not, but and at the Super Bowl party, the guys just, started chatting about their mortgage and their housing. And it felt like in that moment in the room, I'm the only guy other than the two teenage boys that don't own a house yet. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home being like, what is going on in all this? And I thought about your story and just you grabbing your steering wheel as I'm driving home. And I had to like, my gas light came on and I'm like, oh man, I could turn into a story like Bob's. But I say that to say my experiences with guys is they've often had that moment that you've had where they grab the steering wheel really tight, or that feeling of just like overwhelm. Like there's two extremes really. Like if the road to truth is a road, there's a ditch on either side of being really discouraged and a sense of like fatalism, nihilism, of just like, this is never going to get better, as they see interest rates climb and they just get more and more discouraged. And, or there's the opposite, where there's like this hyper fixation on like building wealth and hoarding resources to themselves. I'm curious, as a young man, Bob, have you kind of walked those waters of like, being discouraged of your situation, but also like, have you had the opposite as well, where you're like, maybe now I'm going to hoard these things? I know where your story eventually got, but have you experienced those two extremes as well?
Yeah, 100%. More times than I would like to admit, because I think part of me, like, is a growing Christian that we all are. I've been a believer for over 2 decades now, but yet I still feel like I have so much more room to grow and so many more things to learn about God and understand about Him. But one of the things I've finally come to realize is that I have a tendency, and I'll speak for myself here, to want to get to the point where I don't have to deal with any of that anymore. Basically, I want to get to the point where I'm a perfect Christian. I think that's what it comes down to. And I've tried to like do that. And God has gently like reminded me, you're never going to reach the finish line. Like you're always going to have these moments of doubting. You're always going to have these moments where you don't live up to the perfect ideal and standard that I want, or you don't live a perfectly sinless life. And that's not an excuse for not trying, but it is, I think, for someone like myself and anyone else listening who's like that, to acknowledge that it's okay that we are imperfect beings and that we're never going to get to the point that we're perfect, because we're not supposed to. We're supposed to be dependent on Him and dependent on His grace. And so anyway, so I found that to be somewhat freeing, and that's something I try to remind myself in the midst of that. But yes, there have been plenty of those moments where I've been discouraged and where I've been crying out on one hand, and then on the other side where things went really well for a while, and I got too comfortable, and I got too seemingly independent from God, because it's like, I don't need to pray. Like, everything's working out. Everything's great, And I talk a lot about this, but like it's easy to kind of think about our dependence on God. When there's not money in the bank, everyone wants to, quote Philippians 4:19, my God shall supply all my need according to His riches and glory. But the truth is, even when there's plenty of money in the bank, like He's still your provider. You can't trust in that bank account. And it's so easy to start doing that. And I've had seasons where I've done that. But anyway, I think I'm rambling a little
No,
here,
no, no,
but
it's
tie
good.
me back, pull me back
No,
in.
no, I think that was actually one of the greatest things I pulled from your book, and some of the things that I've pulled from you guys, you and Linda, is the reframing of our money around net worth and our assets,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
I want to say it at the beginning of this podcast because I honestly think it is like the lens through which, if you read your book and if you view your finances, changes everything. Like this, the light bulb came
Yep.
on for me just in a simple reframe, and that is in your book. You talk about the difference between your net worth and your assets under management. And I just want to throw that at the beginning
Yep.
of this podcast because I think it'll frame it for. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot here, but I'll try to keep it brief. But the gist of it is, I've been in the financial world a while, and anybody who's been around understands that your net worth is a great metric to track your financial progress. And it's a great exercise to do because you can measure, it's one number that can tell you whether you're moving forward or backwards, you know? And so I love that as a tool to kind of measure your progress. But the problem I have is the term net worth.
Yeah.
Okay. So, regardless of whether it is $10 million or whether it's negative $2 million, we should never be defining our worth based on that number.
Mhm.
Like that has got to be offensive to God, offensive to Jesus for everything that he did, for what he said we are worth, for us to be defining ourselves or anyone else based on that number. That feels weird to me. So I just don't like the term at all. But instead, the thing that makes so much more sense to me is the term assets under management. And so I look at all the assets that I have, everything, from my 401k to my cars to my money in my checking account, all of that. If I understand Matthew 25 and the parable of the talents
Right.
and this idea of stewardship, everything that I have is actually God's. And I'm simply a manager of what he has entrusted to me. So everything I have, they're just assets under management, assets under my management. And so we have that same net worth sheet that we scratched out net worth and we wrote assets under management. And what I love about it is like you said, it's a reframe that is such a subtle thing, but because like anybody who's been in church for any length of time, you've heard the stewardship idea. It's like, well, it's not God's, it's not yours, it's God's. And I've heard that a million times, but it's like easy to forget it.
Yeah.
And that's why having the constant reminder in my head, assets under management, these aren't mine, these are God's. I'm simply managing it. That changes everything for how you manage money. And there's so many wonderful implications of that we can spend hours
I
talking
love
about.
it. I
But
love it. And
go
honestly, like
ahead.
for me, Bob, that really the light bulb came on for me when I read that because I think that'll help keep guys out of those two ditches. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because it's not
Exactly.
about you and your value, especially as a man. Our audience is men, and oftentimes, when things are going bad, right, we attach our identity to that and our worth to that. It's
Yep.
like, oh man, why can't I provide more for my family, or why am I not
Mm-hmm.
smart enough, or why am I not getting that job interview or that callback? And we attach our worth with the money situation a lot of times. And the same is true for the other ditch. When you're killing it, you can falsely assume that
Yep.
this is something that is because of you, and a lot of times it is because of your hard work, but ultimately, what does the scripture say? Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
if guys listening could actually just detach their worth, right, from the line of whatever's in their bank account,
Yeah.
it'll free them. Like true financial freedom is really realizing that it's not yours to begin with. And,
Yeah.
and I love in your book, and I do want to talk about your book, is Simple Money, Rich Life. Talk to me about why you chose that title in particular, because truthfully, I am much, what you said, you're not much of a car guy. I'm not much of a car guy, and I'm not much of a finance guy. Okay. I'm not a numbers
Yeah.
dude. I'm a creative. And
Yeah.
so simple money to me is like an oxymoron, right? And I'm like, I just don't understand
Mm-hmm.
it. And so talk to me why Simple Money, Rich Life, and we'll jump into some of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I will say this. So we worked with the traditional publisher on this book, and we worked on a title. I'm not joking you. I think it was 7 or 8
Oh,
months to
wow.
land on that title, and we went through, uh, with no exaggeration, probably 1 to 200 different title ideas were bounced around, and this is the one that stuck. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the oxymoron part of it. Like my goal, and I feel like this is my gifting from God, to be able to take complex topics and simplify them and distill them down in a way that people who normally have no interest in the thing can understand it, and to put things in layman's terms and to make them simple and to approach it from an 80-20
Yeah.
perspective, where it's like, most people don't need to become financial experts. You don't need to do that to succeed financially. You just need to get a few basics right. And that's what we try to do in the book and everything else we teach. And so that was the first part of like, this should be simple.
Yeah.
If we're doing it God's way, like it should be simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Then the rich life component really is a little play on words with that. But a rich life is so much more than the amount of money in your bank account. And we want to help believers live a truly rich life, and the subtitle is Achieve True Financial Freedom and Design a Life of Eternal Impact. And, and true financial freedom is another piece of that. It's like, the term financial freedom is thrown around all over the place. But the truth is, like, I know many millionaires who are absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing a podcast, a guy said he was making $6 million per month. And he said it was more miserable than he'd ever been. So clearly, it's not about the amount of money that we have. And I think we all know this, right? We've all heard this enough. We've whatever. But the fact is, there is a true financial freedom in God when we do it his way. When we get to this point, kind of like Paul in Philippians 4, where he's learned how to be content in the high times and the low times. And that is a freedom that money cannot buy. When you can be at peace, regardless of what's going in your bank account, and you can have millions of dollars in your account and not trust in it, but understand that it's just a tool for God's glory. Or on the other hand, where it's completely stripped down and you're like, I don't know where my next meal is going to come from, but I am at peace because God is my provider. And so that is a level of freedom that we call true financial freedom that there's no amount of money that can buy,
100%. Yeah. And that's what I really appreciated, because I think we believe things with our minds sometimes, or with our mouths, and we'll say, oh yeah, like our assurance and our faith is not in our bank accounts.
Yeah.
But then why do we get so anxious and nervous when, things are a little bit rough? And it really, like, who said it? Like, well, Jesus said, where your heart is, there where your treasure is, there your heart is also, right? And there's something tied to our wallets and our hearts that reveals sometimes the ugly side of us. And so I love that. There's another thing I want to ask you about in your book, Bob. The four main ideas you talk about, and when I first saw the in the table of contents, I thought, oh man, I'm unsure about this. But it says, you talked about like saving all you can, earning all you can, and giving all you can, and then enjoying it all. And at first when I saw especially earn all you can, I thought, okay, here we go. But it totally, I'll admit, when I got into it and heard you say that and read the book, I thought, oh man, this guy has a totally different framework for this than I've ever read before. It's just kingdom minded. Can you tell us about those four things and where it came from? I was surprised where this came from. An old John Wesley. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All right. I will, but I'd love to hear. Would you be up for sharing? Like when you were thinking, oh man, where's this going? Like, where did you think it was going to go?
Well, when I hear like earn all you can, growing, I'm not a digital. I think I was in grade 9 when I got my first cell phone. So I'm not a digital native in the sense that I've grown up with a cell phone, but I spent a lot of time on social media, partly because of my role. And right now there's a lot of like messaging to men about what they perceive as financial freedom. And so when I saw, save all you can is pretty standard. Hey, like, what, don't spend, which, I've been trying to do. But the earn all you can is the thought of like, I at any cost, make as much money as possible. When I see that, right? Earn all you can. And I thought, oh man, is this gonna tell, I've been in ministry my whole life, right? And so when I see earn all you can, it's like, okay, there's a ceiling to earning all you can, at least here in Canada, when it comes to ministry and pastoral jobs and those types of things. And so it's like, that's just for entrepreneurs, business people, all these types of things. So that was kind of my perspective when I see that language. But when I got into it, I thought, oh wow, there's a lot more ways to earn all you can than I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that's informative, but I'll touch on some of that. But yeah, so just the framework for the book came from a John Wesley quote that inspired me probably 15 years ago. And he said pretty much everything he laid out. He said, John Wesley, who's in ministry probably most of his life. And so what's funny about him too, which most people don't realize, he actually was one of the highest earning people in all of England at the time. He was earning the equivalent of today's dollars of like $2 million per year. As a preacher and as a writer, which is just crazy to think about. But what I love about it is he said, I earn all that I can, and then I save all that I can. And what he meant by that was like reducing my expenses, so I'm not wasteful in anything. And he said, I do both of those things so that I can give all that I can. And And I just love that because it's so beautiful to me because he took his God-given gift, his ability to speak and to preach, went out and used it to generate income, and then he turned around and used that again. So he impacted people with his preaching and speaking, advanced the kingdom by doing that. And then the money comes back in, and then he's able to give that, impact the kingdom again. And so it's like double dipping of effectiveness. And I love that he saw that and he saw the potential there, because what happens for most people is they don't, even if they do earn all they can, it's not saving all they can. They start getting super sloppy with their spending. There's nothing left. And then there's very little to give away. And, someone earning $2 million who's only tithing or giving 10%, I'm like, I would challenge you to push that a little bit, And so anyway, so he just took an alternative approach that really resonated with us. So we built the book around that. So like you were saying, the first section is saving. And our goal is to, encourage people to do this in a way that is as painless as possible. Like, we're not the hyper frugality police who are going to yell at you for whatever. Like, we just don't do that. It's not our style. But what we want you to do is find the low hanging fruit, the things you're spending money on intentionally or otherwise, that you just don't care that much about, so that you can focus more money on the things you do care about and that you do want to spend on, because that is important. Because the fact is, we live in an era where there's so much money being wasted and so many people don't even know it. And so that's a big part of that section. And then the next section,
if you don't mind,
we'll go
I would like to jump into that, because I think this, for young men in particular, what I actually really appreciate about you and Linda is you guys are not speaking this from like ivory towers. If you go to their YouTube channel, you watch their socials, they'll sit down and show you their budgeting, and it's like super refreshing, right? It's like, well, it's oftentimes with people giving financial advice, well, it's easy for you because you're this, you're that, but you guys show that it's hard work and you do it together. But what I love is that idea that oftentimes so much money is being wasted and you have no idea it's being wasted. And so I took yours and Linda's class, your course on the real money method. And one of the things you encourage you to do off the top there is to just take stock of where your money's going. And I thought I knew. Like, I thought I knew where
everybody does. Everybody does, yeah.
And I was like, I have a Crave account, right? Like, which is like a streaming. I'm like, wait, and I have this other thing. I'm like, I thought I canceled that, or like, what was the other one? A Peloton. Like, I have a Peloton app. Wait a second. I sold that Peloton 4 months ago. Why am I still paying for the membership? And you just, if you're not looking closely, you're not even aware of the ways that you're spending money. Is this common, or is it, I assume it's common?
No.
Okay.
It's super common. And especially for, Gen Z or the younger millennials, it's super common because our parents all grew up in the age of cash and checkbooks. And like, that was pretty much it. And you have one bank account and one checkbook and cash, and like, that's it. And so now we have Cash App and Venmo and PayPal and all these subscriptions that are coming out automatically. And like, no one knows what the heck is going on. So it's actually so much more difficult to do it. But that's why it's so important to use a tool to help you get a picture of what's going on. And in the book, we talk about Empower Personal Dashboard. Another one I like is called Rocket Money. There's multiple ways to do this, but the point is you need to pay attention and actually see what's going on. Because, it's just subscriptions alone. I saw a stat the other day. I think it's the average American has like $200 or $300 per year they're wasting on subscriptions that they don't even know they're paying. Like, it's just crazy, and that's just one of multiple things like that,
Yeah. And it's funny, I heard someone say recently, and they're like, oh, it's too bad we couldn't keep all of these subscription packages and just, pay one fee. I'm like, that's just cable. We're going right back to cable. Like, the whole angle of these things were like that you could have one thing and that, $7.99. And anyway, here we are. In this portion, you guys tell this that you go to the scriptures and you look at 2 Chronicles 20, which I think is such a good illustration for this.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when it comes to saving all you can, like you said, there can be like these like money police that say like, don't ever take another bite of takeout before, and you're like, oh, that's just not possible. But what I love about this story in 2 Chronicles 20 that you guys unpack is the idea that saving all you can, yes, is trusting God. He's going to help you with this. But you've got a part to play. Yeah. And in that story, where it says God will fight for you, but go down tomorrow to battle. To me, through the lens of finances, a lot of times because of discouragement or because of wanting that takeout or whatever, I just don't show up to battle. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trusting
Yeah.
God to
Yeah.
help me, but like, I'm just not doing my part at all. Like, not even a little bit.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, and I've been guilty of that as well. But if I look back at our financial life the last 15 years, we've made so much financial progress from me being broken down at that point and that turning point and having the multiple five figures of credit card debt and student loans and whatever, all the stuff. We've made so much financial progress and we have made some good financial decisions. But the reality is, uh, most of our most significant progress has been a result of God
Yeah.
and the financial miracles that have happened. And so it's insane, I believe, for us as believers not to pull God into this
Yeah.
equation. And so like we're talking about the story of Jehoshaphat in Second Chronicles 20, that's what's so powerful about this is there's a part that God has to do, and there's a part that we get to do.
Yeah.
And we need to do our part and let him do his part. But it's the two of them together because so many Christians just do one or the other.
Yeah.
It's like I'm desperate. I'm just going to cry out to God like I was in my steering wheel, ask God for help. But then when God says, "Hey, why don't you go get on a budget? Why don't you try to spend less than you earn?" You're like la 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 la, you know.
That's not what I
Or
wanted
it's
to
the
say. Yeah.
opposite. Where it's like I'm not going to invite God into this thing. I'm going to muscle it up. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to grind. I'm going to make it all work in my own strength. And like as John Mayer said on one of his live albums, he said, it's a pretty cool thing when you can be 27 and say, I made it happen for myself, and I think so many of us try to do that with our finances where we're trying to do in our own strength. We're trying to do the rice and bean things. And I'm going to frugal my way to this. And it's like, you're going to make some progress doing that. But the real progress is when you invite God into your financial situation and allow him to work through it. Like that's where the game's changed.
Totally. And what I love about your book, you talk about earning all you can, but if we can just focus on this next one after that, giving all you can. Like this, my dad always used to say this thing to me, and I used to think, Dad, you have no idea what you're talking about. But it turns out he does. He would say, Jordan, giving to God's work is one of the best investment plans you can do, right? Like this type of
Yeah.
idea. And I'm like, not that he was suggesting that I give towards God's work so that I receive, but he would just say, listen, man, it was a way of him saying, if you are generous, God will take care of you. And, and your story is incredible, where you were able to give $1 million by the time you were 40 to the work of the kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did this idea come from, and how does something like that happen? Because when I hear that, I go, wow. I'm speechless.
Well, yeah. I mean, for anybody who's like checking out right now, I just want to say we're a middle-class couple.
Yeah.
And, we pretty much always have been. We've had some big years financially, but in general, it's been a roller coaster because we're our own business owners. But anyway, yeah, that has been a financial goal that we had from before we were married, Linda and I, probably 18 years ago. I remember sitting in a car with her while we were engaged and just sharing our dreams. And like both of us had this dream of giving away millions of dollars. And we were super broke, like both like whatever, $10 an hour jobs broke. And anyway, so it made absolutely no sense, but it was a dream that God put in our hearts. Yeah. Now, the way that happened that I think is so interesting are two main things. So in our story, one day I was praying after we had gotten all of our credit cards paid off, all of our car loans paid off, like all of our debt was paid off except for our mortgage. I remember praying to God out in this field near our house, and I was asking him to help us get it paid off faster. And as I was praying that, he interrupted my prayer and said, if you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to begin giving your age as a percentage of your income.
Wow.
So it wasn't an audible voice, but it was a just really clear knowing this is from the Lord because this is absolutely insane. This makes no sense. Like I was given 11% at the time and I was 31. So that means he basically wants me to triple my giving. And anyway, and so, to your dad's point, I didn't know what was going to come of that. All I knew was if I do this, I'm going to be giving away all of my extra income. So it's going to take forever to pay off the mortgage now. But we really sensed that it was the Lord, Linda and I. And so we laid my desire to pay off the mortgage on the altar. And it's like, all right, I'm done. You can have it. I will obey. And so that month we started giving 31%. We jumped from 11% to 31%. 10 months later, our mortgage was paid in full.
Come on.
And it's one of those things where it's like, this is just such an insane miracle. It makes no sense at all. And that happened to be one of those times where the business started taking off a little bit. Money was coming in from all kinds of unexpected places. We got a 5-figure tax refund we weren't expecting, like all kinds of stuff that was just happening. And then we found ourselves 10 months later with the mortgage paid off. And it's like, forever I will be changed and convinced that you cannot outgive God.
Yeah.
And just like your dad said, when you get about the Father's business, or Matthew 6:33, seeks first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then the things will be added. And so anyway, so that was a huge part of us reaching that giving goal, because we've been doing that, given our age, for the last 11 years.
Wow.
And so at this point, we're giving 42% every year by his grace. And there's some months where that's a little bit tight and cozy, but like until he tells us otherwise, we're going to keep doing that. And so that, in conjunction with us tracking what we call our net given, so play off of the net worth thing, we decided if our goal, really what it comes down to is like, we believe that for the Christian, financial success should be measured not by what we accumulate. That's what the world will say. It's like, how much money do you have saved up for retirement or in your whatever? Like, that's how the world measures financial success. But as Christians, we believe that it should be measured by how much we give. And if that's the case, why not track how much we give? And that's what we've been doing for years now. We call it our net given. And by doing that, we realized when we were age 39 in about 8 months, it's like, holy heck, we just crossed $1 million and reached that significant giving goal. And Lynn and I are high-fiving, and it's not like anything that we want to pat on the back for, but it's just like, look at what God's done. Yeah. And I'd rather get excited about that, the fact that we reached a $1 million giving goal, than we've stored up $1 million in our 401k. Yeah. And it's like, and I don't have a problem with that. Like, no judgment, like, or issue with that at all. But my point is, I want to celebrate that a little bit more, Yeah.
And that's what I love about, I had said in those headers of earn, save all you can, earn all you can, give all you can.
Yep.
The interesting thing about Wesley in that quote is that he says, I want to save all I can, earn all I can, so that, like that that piece is so important. And, we are a donor-funded base ministry here at Impactus. And every now and then someone shows outrageous generosity towards us, just like more than my yearly salary. We'll have people just give towards our ministry. And there's times where I'm like, man, I would love to be that person. Like, God, would you allow me to give that type of money? And I'm going to, and like, I feel like, I feel, and this is my opinion, that God honors a generous heart in that way, like a cheerful giver, like someone that like wants to give towards what he's doing. And I honestly think men, especially in young men, could get fired up way more about gaining and building wealth and earning income if this was their motivator. Because I feel like once you get any sort of money at all, it just leaves you feeling like, oh, well, I've got to get more. I've got to get more. I've got to get more. Yeah. If you flip the script a lot like you did with that term that we talked about earlier and said, actually, what about if it's not about getting more, but giving more? I think you'd have a generation of young men that would not be motivated by the cars and by the girls and by the houses, but by the impact, as your byline on your book says. What is it? It says eternal impact. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Achieve true financial freedom and design a life of eternal impact.
Man, like that gets my wheels spinning going, okay, how can I save more? How can I earn more so that I can give more?
Well, and what I think is so cool, Jordan, is it's like a snowball where things often go faster than you think or than you would expect they would, because I remember when we were in debt up to our eyeballs, and like we had a grocery budget so tight, like I would fast like every Friday before we went shopping on Saturday because we ran out of money. And I remember going to the gas station and scrounging around for $1 or $2. It's like, anyway, I remember those really tight moments, and to go from that and to watch God kind of get involved in what we were doing and help us to pay off our debt so much faster than we thought. And like the mortgage thing, which is just insane. Like, it's like, there's no way anyone who knows me would know that isn't because Bob's so smart. Like, that is just God doing what God does, but to the point is there's something about the prioritization there, because it's not, I don't think, again, like I said, we're not the hyper frugality police, and we're not the people who say don't have nice things or anything like that, but it's about the priority. Because if your priority is more about the car, if it's more about really anything else, then that really is an idol. And so it needs to take a back seat to what is the thing that the Lord has for you to do? What is the thing that he wants you to do? And when it's in the back seat, I feel like God seems to be pretty cool with most of it.
Yeah.
And he's a good father who wants to bless his kids.
Right.
So it's not about that, but it's about chasing the provider rather than the provision,
So good, so good. And the challenge that I often give young men when we talk about, like, especially giving, is there's this myth that once I have more, then I'll give. Right. And I spent some time as a pastor, and I'd
Yes.
hear that, sometimes. But my experience is that that's not always the case. It's actually the
Yeah.
opposite. It's the ones that are faithful with little often are entrusted with much, or the ones, if you, like you said, you have millionaires that are just kind of not giving as much as they possibly could, but you've got
Yeah.
faithful people that are only get fixed income, and they're making. Is that your experience as well? Like that, is that a myth,
Yeah.
or is that, or is that just something I thought of?
No, it's absolutely true. And John Rockefeller, who has a questionable
Sure.
reputation in many different ways, but one thing he did say about tithing that I thought was really interesting is he said, if I wouldn't have started tithing when I was making $1 a day, there's no way I would have when I made $1 million. And there is something about that. And that's why at the end of the book, the challenge that we issue to all the readers is what we call the 1% challenge. And essentially what that is, all right, you're not tithing, you're not giving at all. Start giving 1%, because you won't even feel it. I promise you won't even feel it. I've never had anyone come back to me and say, Bob, I started giving 1%. It threw all my finances into a mess. And like no one has ever done that. In fact, I've had people say I started giving 5% or 10% and I didn't even feel it. So the point is, I don't care what you're making, you're not going to feel it.
Yeah.
And you just do that. And every year you increase it by 1%. And that's, again, what we've been doing the last 11 years now.
Cool.
And what's so beautiful is we've increased our giving from 31% to 42% at this point, and we haven't even felt it, because it's like the frog in the pot of boiling water.
Right.
It's just a little bit, and so incremental, you don't even notice.
Yeah.
And that's what's so powerful about this. And you can set it, you can make it automatic. Most churches have a way to, do that automatically, or ministries, you can have it automatically go to them or wherever you want to give, But the point is, you do something that simple, and you can be really quickly, over the next few years, a really generous giver.
100%. And what I love about what you guys do too, Bob, is you leverage automation, you leverage like recent tech. And I just think that's where like a lot of these budgeting ideas and things haven't come out of the Stone Age. Right. And like, not trying to throw any shade at different methods, but like the envelope system, which so many people appreciate, has really become obsolete in the past couple of years when everybody's doing their banking on their phone. And that's where I found a lot of help with your what is it called? Your real money method.
Real money method.
And so,
try to buy envelopes on Amazon with cash. You know what I mean?
it just doesn't work anymore. Bob, quick question for you as we kind of bring this to a close. The last part of your book talks about enjoying it all. And what I really appreciate about you and Linda, and just even talking to you now, is it's clear you enjoy this. Like, this is not some sort of like discipline where you're punishing yourself. Like it's clear that in your generosity, which is sacrificial, right? And I see that. But what's some tips to people that maybe when they think about money, enjoy is just like not in the vocabulary? It's anxiety inducing. It's all those things. What would you say?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things where I feel like we've just kind of discovered that when you do this God's way, that you can enjoy it. And so I had many, many years where I hated my work. I hated every single day that I got up to do. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think there's a way to do this. And and certainly there are jobs where it's like, that's just part of it in seasons. Like, I think God had me in some of those seasons for a reason, just like Joseph's in some challenging seasons, or anybody else. But the point is, there's a way to love the work that you're doing and love the process of creating and generating income. And there's a way to, I believe, to spend, to manage God's resources and how you spend them in a way that isn't wasteful, that you're managing wisely and well, and to have fun doing it. And there's also a way to give and actually have fun, because we know plenty of people who hate giving, hate the thought of giving. I, for many years, hated giving. It felt like a terrible idea. Why would I waste my money on that? And we found a way to love all of them, all three of them. And that's what I believe, that when we do this God's way, there is a way to enjoy all facets of our financial life. And when you do that, You have so much more of a holistically just beneficial, uh, eternally focused financial life
Yeah.
that, back to what your dad was saying, like what I think is so exciting is we're all going to get to heaven.
Yeah.
And I think we're all going to be so thrilled about the eternal investments that we made,
Yeah.
all the money that we've given, all the other ways that we can store up treasures in heaven, but on this side of heaven, it's like we can't really understand what that looks like. But I don't think I'm absolutely convinced that none of us are going to get to heaven and we're going to regret the money that we gave. We're going to regret the time that we spent advancing the kingdom in any way. Because I think we're going to get up there and we're going to be like, whoa, this is the fruit. That's crazy,
It's so good, man. It's so good. We just had a choir come to our church recently from Teen Challenge. I don't know if you have Teen Challenge
Yeah.
around you, but
I'm familiar. Yeah.
it's a rehabilitation for drug addiction, and they brought a choir, and they just began to share the testimonies that God is doing in their life as they're being set free from addiction. And I leaned over and said to my wife, "I'm like, this is the kind of morning where you could just like give away your entire life savings, right? Like when
Yep.
you really get a glimpse and you hear the stories of what God is doing."
Yep.
With your money, it's like, man, it's so easy to hold it open handed, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, we don't get to see that yet. But we look forward to that day
Yeah.
in heaven. Well, Bob, listen, man, thank you so much for joining us today. I would love you take this moment to kind of push what you guys are kind of really getting behind. You guys have courses, you guys have a book, you got the
Yeah.
podcast, YouTube. You're everywhere right now, and so if people want to find you, or kind of what's the thing right now you're trying to push people towards?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a podcast, Seed Time Money Podcast. You mentioned the Real Money Method course. So that's basically our budgeting course that you went through.
It's awesome.
The other kind of main focus that we're doing these days is called our True Financial Freedom course, which is a 6-session course for churches and small groups. And so that's been a primary focus as well. And that covers a lot of the same topics and content as the book, Simple Money, Rich Life.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this is not the last time we chat, and
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
really looking forward to giving you an update on how the Real Money course worked out for
Yeah,
me.
man. Keep me updated.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. We'll see you later.
All right. See you,
See
Jordan.
ya.